hi. Welcome to the start of the Nebraska Fiction Festival. I am Bonnie Johnson-Bartee, hosting here at Northeast Community College, and this is
Chad Christensen. I'll be your friend at Wayne State College tomorrow.
okay. So, well, we didn't really take a lot of time to talk about what we were going to talk about at the beginning, but we want to thank you all for coming. I mean, what a beautiful day, right? The sun is shining. We got a good rain yesterday. It's a perfect day just to kick back and relax and listen to some fantastic authors. We have a great lineup today. We have a great lineup tomorrow. We have an author reading at 11, then 11:20, 11:25. We will switch it up. We'll give about 5 minutes in between. So author 11, author at 11:30, and then we'll have a little break for lunch around noon. Come back at 1 o'clock, and then one at 1:30. And then at 2, and at 2:30 we're actually going to have a forum or an open panel. So we have some questions to ask the authors. We're going to put them up here and probably these nice little cool chairs and hand mics, and we'll walk around and let the audience ask some questions, and yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. People are going to be coming and going. This isn't you have to be here for the whole event, so feel free to get up and move around. We have the Early Childhood is hosting a bake sale right around the corner. Promoting those early childhood programs is a good thing. We need more of those around. We also have some light snacks right across as well, courtesy of the college for anyone who wants those. We have book tables back there as well too, so please do some shopping in between the readers. It's always really nice to sell books. Yeah, feels good. You know, money helps. Let's see, a couple of other things. Please silence your phones if you haven't already. And those chairs in the back there, there's a few of them. Be careful when you sit down on those. They have rollers. So be careful when you sit. It doesn't slide out from underneath you. I'd hate to see someone get hurt. Bathrooms. If you're not familiar with this place and need a break, you can walk straight down the hall. You'll see a printer against the wall. Take a left and you'll see the signs that take you straight to the restrooms. Well, other than, the only other note here that I have is a smiley face that he drew, so there you go.
That's my contribution. I just one other thing, so tomorrow, kind of same schedule, 11 to 3, and then just also a reminder, we're doing a fiction slam at 7 o'clock downtown at the Max Bar and Grill. So hopefully you can have fun today, come to Wayne, have fun tomorrow, and then tomorrow night we'll have the slam.
No, Dad.
That would be great. All right. So here we go. Are we ready to rock and roll? Yeah. I'm so excited. All right. The first reader, Margaret Lukas, received her BFA from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and her MFA from Rainier Writers Workshop in Tacoma, Washington. She taught at the University of Nebraska, Omaha for 11 years. Her short story, The Yellow Bird, was made into a short and premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. She is a recipient of the Nebraska Arts Council Individual Artist Fellowship Award. Her work appears... Uh-oh. We're still good, right? Okay. That worked me out. Individual Artist Fellowship Award. Her work appears in numerous anthologies, and she is a past contributor to Nebraska Land magazine. Her novels include Farthest House, BQB Press, 15. River People, BQB Press. That is an International High Plains Book Award, 2019. The Broken Statue, BQB Press, 2021. A Lakota Education is currently seeking representation while she works on her newest novel. She lives in Omaha. Please help me welcome Margaret.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Chad and Bonnie, for having me. Everybody can hear. I have to tell you, it's a thrill to be here because I love conferences so much. At a conference, I met my critique partner, you know, you go through plenty of them. The one that I've been with for 10 years, and she's helped me on all 4 of my novels. So we've been together a long time. At a conference, I met a woman who I talked to, invited me to send the book that I had finished to them, and they picked it up. I've gone to conferences with my second publisher and met booksellers, and I was at a conference in Houston where I had won a short story award, and that's where I met the woman who turned The Yellow Bird. She asked if she could turn that into a screenplay, and then her screenplay won at conferences. We're on a Moon Dance, and I think it was Telluride. And then a production company in Canada at another conference picked up her screenplay. And that became a movie credit and helped me get into grad school. And I first met Chad at a conference at the Nebraska Book Festival. So I love conferences. They're such lifeblood for writers and everybody. Okay, a little bit about myself. I'm a late bloomer. Made that a late bloomer. A late bloomer. I didn't start college until I was 50 years old. We had put our all 3 children through college, and my 4th child was looking at starting college. And I decided that I wanted to go, that it was time. There was always some reason for me not to go. So at 50, I started college, and then I went to a 3-year master's program, and then I taught for 11 years. And I could see all your little cogs going. Like, did she say 50? And how old is that woman? She's old. Okay. See, I have notes and then I never stick to them. Okay. As was said in the introduction, I have 3 published novels, and I write historical fiction. My novels all have inciting incidents. Well, every novel has an inciting incident. But my novels also have something that I call an historical carryover incident. It's like backstory, but it's something broader, something significant that happens to a wide range of people and filters down through one person. I'm talking about the way children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors are affected, even though they never experienced the Holocaust. In Farthest House, the carryover incident is the lynching of Willie Brown in Omaha. Jonah was a small black boy, and he was hiding in a basement, and he looked through the broken basement shutter doors, and he saw the rioters. They took Willie Brown's body from the jail and hung him, and then they burned him, and then they drug him through the streets. And this little black boy knew that the main reason this was happening was because Willie Brown was black. And so that's the incident. It affected the city. It affected a newspaper reporter won a Pulitzer Prize for it. And the memory never left Jonah. It affected his beliefs about white people and the world, and maybe most importantly, it affected his beliefs about himself his whole life. He never got over that. In River People, the carryover incident is from what's been labeled the Great Sioux Massacre of 1862. If you all remember from your history, that's when the Santee in Minnesota were denied their annuities that they had been promised. And they were told if they were hungry, they could go eat grass. So there was a large uprising for that. And when the angry Santee came to one of my characters' homes, they killed her husband and they killed all her children except for one son. And the reason that one son was saved is because he was 17, he was off fishing in a stream. And she was left for dead. So that woman basically goes mad. She carries that the rest of her life, and she puts all of her hatred and her blame and her loss onto that son. So then it's a story of how that affected the son and the son's grandchildren, that he carried that blame for himself. So it's this study of characters, not just by backstory, but by this deeper, broader thing that happens. In Broken Statue, we're dealing with legalized prostitution in Nebraska at the turn of the 20th century. And in the Lakota Education, it's about the massacre of Wounded Knee. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So if you'll bear with me, I'll read just a snippet from River People, which was my second novel, and like Bonnie said, it won first place at the International High Plains Book Awards in 2020. To set the scene, I'm partial to Victorian and late Victorian and early Edwardian era, so my books are mostly kind of set in that era. So to set this scene, Reverend Jackdaw is a self-declared preacher. And by that I mean he didn't have any sort of theological training, and he's failed at everything he's tried thus far in his life. But now he's decided that God wants him to shatter his fire and brimstone message all over the world, particularly Nebraska. In this section, he decides to bring home 11-year-old Bridget from an orphan train. And I suppose you're all familiar with orphan trains. It was a welfare program that operated between 1854 and 1829. And they shipped over 200,000 children from eastern states, mostly to Midwest rural locations. And so that they load these kids on the train and then they would just stop at different places. There was rarely any sort of background check done on the people who accepted children. But they had two requirements that was standard all the way through. One was that you had to be 17 years of age. And the other was, if you couldn't write your name, you had to have an X put on the line where the matron wrote down your name. So think about that. You could have a little boy, a little girl, if you were 17, and you put an X by your name. And this went on for years. So in this section, Reverend Jackdaw is still in New Ulm, Minnesota, the center of the Santee uprising. He's in town and he's just received a letter. He's been waiting for confirmation about free housing in Omaha. And the reason it's free, he's going to take his wife and this orphan that he's adopted there. And the reason it's free because when they get there, they find out it's nothing but a shack on stilts along the Missouri River. And the reason that it's on stilts is because it's on the lowland, and every time the river floods, then snakes wash in. So it's on stilts. So it's just incredible, awful place. Okay, I've timed this section. It's only about 2 minutes. Actually, it's only 4 paragraphs. So if you don't like author readings where the author actually reads, but I think that's long enough to give you a good idea of Reverend Jackdaw's character. Reverend Jackdaw stood outside the New Ulm post office. At last, everything was coming to pass. In Omaha, he'd have a community of followers, prosperous men and women who hold the Reverend Jackdaw in high esteem. His commission was clear this time, as clear as it had been for Moses. It could be written on 2 golden tablets. The first was building that church. The second was raising sons to carry on work after he had gone to his eternal reward. He was 63. He wasn't too old to sire them. Abraham had been even older, and from his loins had come the 12 tribes of Israel. When Isaiah was born, Sarah had already advanced far past a woman's worthwhile years. Epi was only 17, ripe for bearing. Just as he was ready to slap the reins over the horse's back, the Lord stopped him. 2 whores came screaming out of the saloon. They screeched and stomped on each other's parasol, breaking the stays and ruining the paper, cheap paper. Their sin-dazzled skirts flung, their lowered ankles and calves flashed in red stockings, and their groping hands threatened to rip open the other's indecent bodice, bright and low-cut, nicks and heaving bosoms bare. Watching the horse, he understood what the grinning spectators did not. Thanks to the stage growl, the ladies would be the talk in every saloon. By nightfall, men who'd lost interest in them would be standing in line again, eager for a $2 ticket to hell. The whore's spectacle unfolding in front of his eyes, the perfect timing of it was divine orchestration, had to be. And then, as if nodding his head in wild approval, the Lord sent him the 3rd gift of the day. The letter, the horse, and now a flyer nailed on a post, fluttering not 4 feet away, free orphans. So this family obviously is very scared of Indians, native people, indigenous people. So what do you expect happens to them when they get to Nebraska? What's the worst thing? Of course, there is an indigenous fever. Things go downhill from there. River People isn't my only novel with indigenous people. The 4 people I've written about so far have some native history, and 3 have major native characters. And I'm often asked if I have some sort of native blood, and the answer is I do not. But I will remind you, if you were born and raised in the United States, you were born and raised on native land that was taken usually through murder in one form or another, either poisoning them or right out shooting them. I was raised in central Nebraska on land that, when whites crossed the Missouri invaded, it had belonged to the Pawnee. And they lived up and down the Cedar River, which is a river that I crossed every day of my childhood. We used to hunt along there and find arrowheads. And my childhood didn't have just the Cedar River. I had, on one side, we had the Genoa Indian boarding school, where they had as many as 800 or maybe 1,000 at one time. Maybe somebody knows more. That was on one side, and then on the other side was the Sacred Hills, Sacred Knob Hill in Kermos, Nebraska, and you are aware of that. And my grandfather was born in 1880. Yeah, 1880. He'd be 144 today. He was 10 years old and living in western Nebraska when the Sitting Bull was killed. And of course, newspapers across the United States were flooded with articles about Sitting Bull's murder for 2 weeks. Because what happened 2 weeks later was the Wounded Knee Massacre. And they took over the newspaper accounts. So he loved to tell stories about his childhood, about the Pawnees that would come down to the farm and how he would deal with, how, they became friends and stuff. Stories about Sitting Bull and Wounded Knee. And he told stories to my father, who liked to also tell stories to me. So I think I grew up with a lot of Native American history. That's just, how I got so much interested in it. And I was also surprised how much history there was right here in Nebraska. There's just things happening all over. I was amazed when I heard the story of Willie Brown. John McClain, Crazy Horse, was murdered in Nebraska, right? Yeah, Crazy Horse too. Okay, so I was amazed when I first heard the story of Willie Brown. The Omaha mob brought rioters in on the train from Kansas City. They paid for the transportation, and they paid for all the liquor that they could get down these people until they got here. And then they set him loose on the courthouse, where Willie Brown was under arrest. He was under arrest for reportedly harassing a white woman. His accuser, of course, just happened to be the girlfriend of one of the mob leaders, so nobody believed that. But the reason for doing it was to prove to the city, the reason the mob did the whole thing was to prove to the city that the mayor couldn't handle the city. He was up for re-election, and they wanted a mob mayor elected. So they brought this all in. Somebody won a Pulitzer Prize for the article that was written about it. It was really a huge deal. Except, you know, it was so disturbing. First of all, doesn't that all sound eerily familiar? History repeating itself. But for me, it was so disturbing to think that one man, this mob leader, could bring thousands of men to that level of fury. It was just shocking. And these are people who never met Willie Brown, who probably never even considered Willie Brown. You know, he's disposable. He was an object. For a Lakota education, reading about the Wounded Knee Massacre was again a shock. The way that the soldiers would hunt down innocents, the way that they did. But the kicker that made me really write the Lakota education was a wonderful book I saw. Maybe some of you have. It was called Eyewitness at Wounded Knee. It showed all the pictures of everything that happened. I keep talking with my hands. All the pictures of everything that happened. They showed the mass grave where they put all the bodies, and they showed the field where all the dead were laying frozen. And in the back, there was one picture. It showed the wounded soldiers were taken to the army camp, to the army tents and stuff. But the wounded Minikanju who survived were taken to a church. And there they basically were just taken in there to die. Those that they gathered, they left a lot of them just to freeze to death on the field. Some they took to the church. So this is a picture of the inside of a church. And you see the cross, and you see all these Christmas boughs hanging up, and you see the altar and all this stuff. It looks religious. But then on the floor is a thin layer of straw, and all these wounded people that are bleeding all over the place. And the picture that picture really got me. But there was a mention that Bigfoot's wife, who was the Minikanju chief, that his wife was one of the women laying on that floor. And she lived for 3 days before protection got her. You know, there were no antibiotics or anything like that. So that's what made me write that book. I wanted to speak for her, to think about lying on that floor, and you're surrounded with all this Christian stuff, which is supposed to be, brotherly love, and you're supposed to give up your religion because your religion is pagan and everything, and this was done to your people. So that was disturbing. Okay, skip a lot of stuff. Lakota Education, as Bonnie said, is still unpublished, but it did just win the National Pen Women's Award in Fiction for 2024. The novel is a fictionalized version of Wounded Knee. Thank you. The novel is a fictionalized version of Wounded Knee, though of course I tried to keep as close to actual facts as I could. The Army kept records, and there were a lot of newspaper articles across the country, printed accounts. Sometimes they were wildly different, so you don't know really what the truth was. But by adding fictional white characters, it let me retell the story from another perspective without trying to speak for the voices of the Sioux, the Minikanju, and the Lakota who were killed that day, or even to speak for their ancestors who are alive now, and the massacre means one thing to them. I didn't want to try to put words in their mouths. I had a unique problem when how to tell this story. The problem was how to particularize the violence in such a way that it's not glossed over. I felt if the violence was portrayed in such a way that it normalized or sanitized, you know, if I picked all the spines out of the cactus, told that story, then I was appropriating the racist history of my own game. You know, then I was ruining what they have. And at the same time, as a novelist, I needed to keep readers from putting the book down because they don't like books that remind them of tough things. So I wanted to keep it strong and not lie about it, not, like I said, sanitize it at the same time. You know, if people don't read it, they're lost. So I'll close with another equally short reading. Well, it's a little bit longer, but you can take it. My protagonist is Lauder. She's a 22-year-old white teacher, and she's teaching at one of the Pine Ridge day schools. And she knows that the band of Minikanju, comprised mostly of elderly women and children, have been surrounded by over 500 soldiers of the 4 rolling cannons. The Hotchkiss guns have all been taken out there. You should also know that Lauder has what she calls risings. This is where she leaves her body and is mentally transported to a scene. It happens, she's studying photography, and it happens a lot when she's studying her father's silver maps and redrawing them. Suddenly she'll see herself, she will be on the scene, walking amongst the dead people, all the suffering, crying, so that's what her rising is. So this begins one morning in the classroom, the day, December 29th, the day of the massacre. And again, I've cut drastically in here. I've cut about 10 pages down to 3. So it feels like it was too jerky. Quickly, it does, but hopefully it doesn't in the novel. So pay attention. Sound and thunder. Lauder froze, startled by the noise and the vibration coming through the air, groaning around loose classroom windows, rattling them, vibrating pencils on desks. Children watched her, alarm stark on their faces. Children crying by lives of suffering to remain vigilant to danger. Get down, her arms in the air, motioning. Dropping to the floor, 5 and 6-year-olds huddled, cowered. Little Rose pressed her face into her brother's chest. She stands brave, already on her knees, hunched lower, buried her face in her arms. What's happening? Lauder dared not voice her fears out loud. What warranted the use of the rolling cannons against innocents? First one, then a second boy broke from the group, ran from the room. Stop, Lauder cried. She yelled again, but they ran on. With her longer legs, she could chase them across the schoolyard and drag them back. But in pulling, several others were likely to run off and into danger. Go straight home, she shouted. A goal there, straight home. She hurried for the classroom door, slammed and fell against it, slid down, feeling as if her body pooled on the floor. With eyes full of tears and terror, the children crawled to her, huddled around her like a bevy of quaking ducks. She shamed herself, this inability to mask her fear. She was shamed, too, by what she saw in the children. They lost family, seen parents, elders weeping over the dead. For them, tragedy lived close, waited their steps, stunned their sleep. Rifles continued firing, cannons continued booming, rattling windows, making children scream. Keep slapped hands over ears. At the signs alone, she couldn't judge the distance to the uproar. Half a mile? Were there sufficient hills to absorb the bullets? And if not, how far would they fly through the winter air? Suppose after killing Bigfoot's band, soldiers came for the school children. What was there to stop them? Extermination of a race meant everyone. It's all right. She pulled them closer, her hands shaking. She cut cheeks, lifted chin, squeezed shoulders. Now I'm going to skip through a rising that she has, that she fights, and I'm going to skip through all the, what the children hear of the battle. Reading out a couple pages. The thunder finally slowed, then rumbled away. Windows settled in their casement. An weariness ghosted the room. Had the murdering lasted 20 or 30 minutes, or had it been 20 or 30 hours? A rifle shot cut the silence, a wasp sting to the back of her leg. Then others, the bang, a moment, a bang. The sporadic and sinister lone shots carried their own macabre truth. She knew every able-bodied Miniconjou male had died in the first flurry. Any male able to wield a gun, a knife, a club, or even a rock had rushed to the front, fought to slow the soldiers and give fleeting wives, mothers, and children a minute more, possibly two. The males had been killed first. This late shooting was studied shots, aimed, picking out women and children as though firing on a warren of rabbits. The top of Lauder's head buzzed again, open. She was there amongst the women, running, the thunder of charging horses bearing down on them, beasts in saddles kicking flanks, firing guns. Fear poured through her and the women, through the bodies of children, some too big to carry, and whose hands mothers tugged, begging them to run faster, faster. Old women fell, crying out to daughters to leave them behind. Daughters refused to do so, dropped to their knees, huddled around their aging mothers, took the first bullets. When the noise stopped again, Lauder found herself back in the classroom, the children still frozen around her. What felt like another hour passed. Little Rose urinated in Lauder's lap, and feeling the urine run over her hip, seeing it spread onto the floor, a silver thread snaking to within an inch of Stan's grave. Lauder wiped it with her hand, swiping the urine back and into her own skirt.